So it says right here they're using copyrighted content as fair use, so I'm going to do the same with their content.
Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder group called the Plandemic Emergency Board.
So here with the ominous music, the filmmakers are trying to prove to you their thesis, that this was planned out, that these people are not taking data from all the other epidemics that they've already witnessed and seen the common patterns, but they are planning it out to take over the world.
Pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit.
Why they would telegraph all their moves on video right before they do the evil deed is a mystery to me.
With some bad actors and leave it before the courts to decide whether they have actually spread some fake news.
A new coronavirus. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia.
This rapid cut editing is not benign. The filmmakers are not just trying to present the facts as they are expositorily. They are trying to persuade you into feeling that this is too similar to be a coincidence. If you talk to some health professionals, however, you'll realize that a coronavirus is the most likely virus to create a pandemic because it's so virulent, because it spreads so easily.
With enough money and political will, anything is possible.
Penalties have been put in place for spreading harmful falsehoods, including arrests.
If the solution means controlling and reducing access to information, I think it's the right choice.
What exactly are the risks and benefits of staying home from work? Absolutely, we need to save lives, but we literally cannot afford a heavy-handed response that suffocates our economy.
The world saw large-scale protests and in some places riots. This led to violent crackdowns in some countries and even martial law. The public lost trust in their respective administration. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years. The society
Sounds like they did a very good job of anticipating all of the things that would happen in a major pandemic like this.
We have to ask, did this need to be so bad?
Real conspiracies come in very different shapes and sizes. Watergate, Enron, the college bribery scandals. But conspiracy theories all look similar. This is because our brains use a story template to make meaning of all the data we can't understand. When there are big unknowns in the world, like what is the nature of this new virus sweeping through society that could kill me, and the scientists don't yet agree on their guesswork, our mind's need for certainty drives us to connect the dots even if they don't connect that way. We fit the data into our story template, spinning it and filtering out anything that doesn't support the theory, and our brains reward us with a great big dopamine hit. The conspiracy story template consists of evildoers lurking in the shadows or hiding in plain sight, misrepresenting themselves, somehow having achieved unrivaled centralized power over the group, city, country, or world, always just on the cusp of finally destroying our freedom. And yet there is still time to stop them and expose them for who they really are: evil people. The establishment has been corrupted by the powers that be. Even your highly educated doctor friend of many years is either brainwashed or on the take. Sometimes there is a hero who is at odds with the establishment, one discredited rebel with nothing to lose. If everyone wakes up to this truth that I did, we will rise up and free ourselves. The more corrupt, the more evil, the more exciting the story. Feel that excitement in your belly when you think of that. This sensation is driving all conspiracy theorists. Many of the movies in the thriller or detective genre were built on this same story template. The Matrix, Chinatown, Minority Report, Batman, Hunger Games. These movies tap into that story template we are wired for and reinforce it. Reality is never so simple, and the villains in real life tend to be damaged human beings with human motivations, not pure evil. Conspiracy is akin to religious fervor. When people are scared, overwhelmed, ashamed, self-loathing, in identity crisis, the human brain reaches for any device it can to rebuild our sense of identity and self-esteem. Emotionally imbalanced, we divide the light from the dark, purifying ourselves by projecting evil upon others. After this subconscious spiritual self-division, we feel innocent in comparison. We have put ourselves back on the white horse by casting others around us as the villains. And if someone tries to take this myth away from us, they become one of the villains, and we will attack them viciously. Now, there are clearly real conspiracies. Russia clearly interfered with the 2016 election, and Epstein clearly was running a pedophile ring. But deciding who is coordinating those conspiracies can't just be solved by speculation. Those conclusions require strong evidence. Documentaries can present strong evidence, like Errol Morris did in The Thin Blue Line, which actually provoked a reinvestigation into the wrongful sentencing of an innocent man. But documentaries can also cut the data in any which way to tell the story they want you to hear. Let's take a look at Plandemic.
On May 4th, 2020, as part of a documentary series called Plandemic, I released an interview featuring science whistleblower, Dr. Judy Mikovits. The interview received fierce backlash for spreading what the media declared dangerous conspiracy theories. As a father and a veteran media producer, there was no way that I would release harmful information into the world during a moment as vulnerable as now.
That's for us to determine.
Judy Mikovits is one of the most honest, caring, and courageous women I've ever known.
Sorry I can't just take your word for it.
Why then would the most powerful forces of big tech, politics, media, and medicine go to such extreme measures to silence her voice all over the world?
Well, it might have something to do with the large number of inaccuracies portrayed in the last film, like there is no vaccine for any RNA virus that works, or that Ebola couldn't infect humans until it was engineered in a lab, or that the US working with the Wuhan lab is somehow a conspiracy, or that hydroxychloroquine has been well tested to work on COVID-19, or that all flu vaccines contain coronavirus, or that wearing a mask and sheltering in place is somehow harmful to your immune system.
Why did you agree to retract your own XMRV paper?
The paper was actually force retracted. I was actually being held in jail.
You told me that you had financial offers to remain silent.
If you simply say you made a mistake and promise never to say another word, you can keep everything. You'll get all of your grants. You'll get everything back, millions of dollars. You'll get publication and funding. My lawyer said, that's the best offer you're going to get. I said, you don't understand me. I don't need an offer. I've already lost everything.
Now, she's trying to indicate that she's moral and wouldn't sell out. But the words, I lost everything, could also suggest why someone might do a documentary like this, because she's got no reputation left to lose.
Cover this up. I will never stop telling the truth.
Now, she may believe that statement that she is telling the truth, but her version of the truth may not be the most credible version of reality. Now, what do you think the filmmaker is trying to convey to you by this image sequence? This man's professional, he's very impressive, and that is the image they are trying to get across. This guy is legitimate, and we should trust him.
We maintained a series of inquiries into every individual, every organization, and every company that is involved in anything that either blurs the line of biological and chemical weapons or crosses that line in any of 168 countries.
So that's his specialty.
In 1999, there were 1 million patents digitized by IBM. And those 1 million patents were the first time human innovation had been put into an electronic digital searchable format. We took that information and we did a very simple exercise using our linguistic genomics technology, where I made the horrific assessment that approximately 1/3 of all patents filed in the United States were functional forgeries, meaning that while they had linguistic variations, they actually covered the same subject matter. In 1999, patents on coronavirus started showing up, and thus began the rabbit trail.
March 2003. Panic grips Hong Kong as a deadly new virus sweeps through the city.
In 2003, the Center for Disease Control saw the possibility of a gold strike, and that was the coronavirus outbreak that happened in Asia. They saw that a virus they knew could be easily manipulated was something that was very valuable, and in 2003, they sought to patent it. And they made sure that they controlled the proprietary rights to the disease, to the virus, and to its detection, and all of the measurement of it. We know that Anthony Fauci, that Ralph Baric, that the Center for Disease Control, and the laundry list of people who wanted to take credit for inventing coronavirus were at the hub of this story. From 2003 to 2018, they controlled 100% of the cash flow that built the empire around the industrial complex of coronavirus.
So I'm already very impressed with his storytelling ability, and it's convincing me to see that, oh my gosh, Fauci and Baric and the CDC are behind the invention of the coronavirus that's killing people today. Now, if you talk to a doctor, which I did, you'll realize that the patents he's referring to are for recombinant coronaviruses, which many organizations own. If you do a Google patent search for methods for production of recombinant virus, you will find thousands of results because this is a commonly used thing in many different industries, not a big conspiracy.
In 2002, there was a recognition that the coronavirus was seen as an exploitable mechanism for both good and ill. On April the 25th, 2003, the U.S. Center for Disease Control filed a patent on the coronavirus transmitted to humans. Under 35 U.S. Code Section 101, nature is prohibited from being patented. Either SARS coronavirus was manufactured, therefore making a patent on it legal, or it was natural, therefore making a patent on it illegal. If it was manufactured, it was a violation of biological and chemical weapons, treaties, and laws. If it was natural, filing a patent on it was illegal.
Yes, but they provided no evidence yet that the coronavirus that's killing people was patented.
In the spring of 2007, the CDC filed a petition with the Patent Office to keep their application confidential and private. They actually filed patents on not only the virus, but they also filed patents on its detection and a kit to measure it. Because of that CDC patent, they had the ability to control who was authorized and who was not authorized to make independent inquiries into coronavirus. You cannot look at the virus, you cannot measure it, you cannot develop a test kit for it. And by ultimately receiving the patents that constrained anyone from using it, they had the means, they had the motive, and most of all, they had the monetary gain from turning coronavirus from a pathogen to profit.
Ooh, very spooky. He stated his claim, but did you notice that he didn't give you any actual evidence? He's just told you about something you're unfamiliar with, recombinant coronaviruses, which happen to be owned by many different companies and used for many different things. But he's equating it with the COVID-2 that's killing people today. This is sleight of hand.
Between 2012 and 2013, something happened.
And now you're on his train of thought, you're following his story, and the filmmaker is in no way trying to verify or push back against this incredible leap over all of the need for evidence to support this claim.
That funding suddenly became impaired by something that happened at the NIH.
So he's speculating.
And in 2013, the NIH said gain-of-function research on coronavirus should be suspended. The National Institutes of Health had a moral and social and potentially legal reason to object to research. But the letters that were sent to the researchers essentially said, you are receiving notice that we're telling you to stop. And now on the bottom of the page, we're going to clarify what stop means. Keep going.
And this is good conspiracy storytelling. We don't have the context to understand whether this organization only makes voluntary recommendations or if it actually has power to shut something down.
You fund the Wuhan Institute of Virology to do the stuff that sounds like it's getting a little edgy with respect to its morality and legality, but do you do it straight way? No. You run the money through a series of cover organizations to make it look like you're funding a U.S. operation, which then subcontracts with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The U.S. could say, China did it. China could say, the U.S. did it. And the cool thing is, both of them are almost telling the truth.
So if we don't know anything about the relationship between U.S. researchers and the Wuhan lab, and why the Wuhan lab is a place that they focus on coronaviruses because there are so many bats in that area that tend to produce them, well, then we might just totally believe this man's theory. You need to do more research to understand what are the real relationships here. What is the context? And yet, in this documentary, they're just zipping ahead now on the heels of telling you this fabulous story of conspiracy.
And prove that it was due to biological warfare and was not a natural occurrence. So I published that 28 years ago. Early in this pandemic, I did not think the coronavirus was a natural occurrence from bats. I feel quite convinced that this was a laboratory-designed organism. There have been hundreds and hundreds of leaks from high-containment laboratories that do research on pathogenic coronaviruses and other potentially lethal organisms. I was particularly interested in a paper that came out in Nature Medicine by 5 scientists claiming, and it was definitely a natural occurrence rather than a lab construct, but the arguments they used did not hold water. They didn't really make a lot of scientific sense, and yet all kinds of very important people started parroting what this paper said. And so that, of course, got me scratching my head saying, why are these people risking their reputation when it's obviously illogical, doesn't hold water? Somebody must have made them publish this, and somebody must have told these other people that they have to say it's a great piece of science.
There's a big leap there from this paper was not valid and it got published anyway to there are powers that be pushing this agenda all over the place. And right now we've got another opinion corroborating this storyline. We should be asking ourselves, why has this documentarian not interviewed anybody with a different opinion? Why has he not challenged these claims yet at all? Is it because this is not a real documentary? It's a piece of entertainment designed to get you into the conspiracy story mindset for a fun ride. And I'd say that's doing a very good job of that.
See, the problem with all of this is the evidence is right in front of our face. And when confronted with evidence, we are told fact checkers are somehow transcendent.
Is that so? From what I've seen, fact-check organizations basically tell you if there are spurious claims in an argument, and then they give you links to research it for yourself.
When seeking answers to life's most pressing questions, where do we go first? Google. Enter the subject, hit go, and there it is. Only what they want us to see.
Now, this is a classic conspiracy theory reductionist argument, reducing the complexities of internet search algorithms and the censorship that may be happening on the internet to this centralized power hub of evil manipulators who are controlling everything from behind the scenes.
The logical mind concludes, well then, it must be true. The illusion that numerous news sources have arrived at the same conclusion gives us confidence to share the chosen narrative. And just like that, we become the unwitting pushers of propaganda.
Now, this is incredibly true, but it works both ways, and this film itself is doing the same thing. Every time they state something is true, every time they state the storyline, the narrative that they want you to hear, they are peddling their propaganda. Now, the mind's most basic function is to link ideas through association. And so now what this documentarian is doing is basically just creating links for your mind to follow. Google is bad. Snopes is bad. They don't actually try to warrant any of their claims at this point. They're just tainting everything with the suggestion that this person is corrupt. And that's unfortunately enough for our minds to put these individuals in the villain category. This is the equivalent of discrediting Mikovits because she went to jail once.
Dr. Mikovits claimed she was arrested without a warrant and jailed without a charge. Snopes rated her statement false. Had they bothered to explore the arrest documents, they would have seen that indeed there was neither a warrant nor signatures to officiate a charge.
Now he's pushing this technicality that the paperwork was never filled out. She was arrested for a reason, right? Her office did call the police on her for taking things home from the office that weren't hers.
100% correct. Judy has never been charged with any crime.
This is essentially a bait and switch.
Facebook's fact-checking arm, PolitiFact, is owned by the Poynter Institute.
So now we're literally connecting dots of association.
Such as Google and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Like Snopes, PolitiFact has a history of misleading the public.
And now they foolishly accuse Wikipedia of somehow being under the control of this centralized power when it is literally the most crowdsourced website on the internet. Without any real facts, they've basically discredited all of the fact-checking organizations that have accused them of blatantly lying, which they have.
I don't have to remind many Americans that the Center for Disease Control was the one that said you should use DDT in your homes.
Used right, it is absolutely harmless to humans and animals.
Now, this is totally valid and a wonderful point that the documentary is making at how many times in history we have allowed things like DDT, asbestos, Agent Orange, all these things basically to kill people, make people sick without having properly tested them.
You're going to be hearing more about advanced guidelines.
Because if you can keep people from assembling, guess what they're not talking about? They're not talking about the issues of the campaign. If you can keep people in their homes, the only source of information that you can have is what you curate for them. Now
This is just a blatantly false claim. People are talking about the elections. They're talking about data. They're talking about this film. Staying at home, wearing masks, socially distancing has not stopped us from communicating at all. But the idea and the image of a police state is very powerful to prove the conspiracy theory storyline.
To control disseminated information. In the early 1900s, oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller took control of every newspaper and news editor of it.
John D. Rockefeller, our classic conspiracy theory trope. Now our documentarian just goes off the rails, going straight to the heart of the conspiracy theory mindset.
To the point where he will do our bidding against his will.
It's a great brainwashing process to change the perception of reality of every American.
So now the filmmaker is editing all these clips together from the past to give you this idea that the government is intentionally trying to manipulate and control everybody mentally, like a big brainwashing mind control system.
It was the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that opened the door for predatory corporations to monopolize the industries of print and broadcast.
This bill protects consumers against monopolies. It guarantees the diversity of voices.
Today, a handful of corporate empires own and control the vast majority of everything you read, hear, and watch.
Now, this is just factually true, of course, and it has to do with capitalism, not necessarily an evil cabal centralized power that's controlling all of them. But one should definitely question whether we are living in an oligarchy.
There's an industry that is paid to go after and target journalists, whistleblowers, and inundate our consciousness and the images we see to try to ruin, destroy, or smear the idea that they don't like or the person who's delivering it.
You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
This is a standard tactic used by propagandists to set a tone so that anything that follows will be seen through the lens of absurdity.
Plandemic, a pseudo-documentary filled with a hodgepodge of conspiracy theories.
When the story template is the same, and we know from psychology why it comes up so frequently, then you have to show it in context with its other absurd claims.
Mr. Oliver then attempts to debunk the idea that a beach, aka nature, holds any value in boosting our body's natural immune system.
Now he's doing the bait and switch again, mischaracterizing his own argument from the last film that masks suppress your oxygen and that sanitizing yourself keeps you from getting the microbe.
In 1979, the world decided that we needed the Bayh-Dole Act because we needed to reform our patent system. And one of the modifications was we allowed recipients of federal funding to patent and retain economic interest in the research that the public paid for. You get a $5 million grant from the taxpayer, and then you get to charge the taxpayer a premium for the technology they paid to develop.
Pfizer's going to get nearly $2 billion. Moderna receiving $438 million in taxpayer money. And yet both companies have said they will not sell the vaccine at cost. They're going to make a profit on it. Should pharmaceutical companies profit off this vaccine research that taxpayers have
This is a
helped
valid argument and conversation to be had, but ultimately these organizations are working for collective health. And so the fact that our government is investing in them in the outset is not necessarily morally wrong. The post office is something that's supported by American tax dollars, and it still charges for stamps and postage.
Placing the conception date at least 1 year prior to the actual pandemic.
There is no question that there will be a surprise outbreak.
Now we go back to attacking the global pandemic exercise 201 as they did at the beginning of the film. Now, let me ask you this. Why would they make this public if it was a telegraphing of their plan? They wouldn't. If they were trying to actually run a conspiracy, this would be the stupidest thing they could possibly do. Clearly, they are trying to prepare people for something that's likely to happen in the near future. And man, were they right.
The way fact checkers have said has nothing to do with the coronavirus outbreak. just happenstance. This is that wonderful universe of improbabilities where events just co-emerge and then nature conveniently backs itself into our architecture.
And you see how we can take the same evidence and spin it in the exact opposite direction to make it not about our safety, but about our manipulation and control. Instead of a group trying to prepare to protect humanity from a deadly disease, they're planning it.
Dis and misinformation circulating over the internet.
Look, they were predicting this film.
I'm curious. Who wrote the Event 201 script?
I literally outlined a script just like this last summer. Is that such a hard coincidence to accept? Your personal connections obviously do influence your advancement in your career. But maybe he is also qualified. Maybe he's not just some patsy criminal for these people.
You cannot find a person promoting this scenario that's not part of the interlocking directorates of the World Health Organization, the CDC, the NIAID, or the organizations that are the philanthropic cover organizations that fund them. If you have conflicts of interest in the funding and in the decision-making and in the inside knowledge that you have between competing or competitor organizations, that is a violation of the antitrust laws of the United States.
This is not an indictment against doctors. More than anyone, they are under the stranglehold of the single largest lobbying power in Washington.
Now we're talking about something real.
Pharmaceutical industry spends at least twice the amount as big oil to influence laws, policies, and public perception. Thanks to Mr. Rockefeller, the architect of American monopolies, no industry has more power over our lives than Big Pharma.
Now the filmmaker goes on a long period of trying to villainize Bill Gates and make him into essentially an evil con artist. He is the ultimate villain in our story. In '98, Microsoft was accused of antitrust violations, and they did have to pay a penalty.
Gates invested $100 million to set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Overnight, Bill Gates transformed his public image.
Bill Gates 2.0, the man you don't know.
The rebranding campaign paid off. His net worth swiftly doubled, earning Bill Gates the title of richest man in the world.
Now the question we should ask is, did his wealth double because of his rebranding or just because Microsoft was a growing industry in computers?
In a Wall Street essay, Bill Gates declared vaccines the best investment I've ever made.
There's been over a 20-to-1 return. So if you just look at the economic benefits, that's a pretty strong number compared to anything else.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has made millions of dollars each year from companies blamed for many of the same social and health problems the foundation seeks to address. The Gates Foundation has investments in 69 of the worst polluting companies in the U.S. and Canada. Other companies in the foundation's portfolio have been accused of transgressions, including forcing thousands of people to lose their homes, supporting child labor, defrauding and neglecting patients in need of medical care. The Gates Foundation has not provided details.
William H. Gates III and Melinda French Gates.
As a top donor to both the WHO and the CDC, no one man has more power than Bill Gates to influence and control the health and medical freedom of all people.
Normalcy only returns.
If he wanted to really do this, if he was the mastermind pulling all the strings from behind the curtain, why would he be on the front lines giving speeches on television? That would be a stupid thing to do. If he was that smart and in control, he would just hide and let someone else be the spokesperson, not put himself open to target. Then the documentary ties him to Jeffrey Epstein, just like everyone else that we want to villainize today.
Right on the connection.
That it was all about philanthropy, that Bill Gates just wanted to find new sources of money.
Why would one of the richest men in the world choose to partner with the world's most notorious pedophile?
Was it known to us or to Bill Gates that he was the most notorious pedophile?
Bill Gates is either the most misunderstood man alive or one of the most convincing con men to ever live.
Now that is a wild accusation.
This isn't a vaccine story. This is a population management story.
Evidence, please.
If your goal is to make this beautiful earth that we live on an exclusive playground for the entitled few,
in the house.
If it's someone that is refusing, we will definitely consult with our health officer to look into next steps.
So the sheriff's department.
Some people are ratting their neighbors out, calling the police, but others are turning to the internet, where social distance shaming has gotten ugly.
it's usually because people willingly surrender their freedom in return for protection against some external threat. That's what I fear we are seeing now.
We are being conditioned to have the excuse for unbelievable acts of tyranny, which will be justified by Remember 2020.
Okay, now this is just pure filmic art in which the filmmaker is basically using words and images to scare the audience shitless and make them believe that this is the end of their freedom, where there's no evidence so far to suggest this.
And this is also a test of humanity, to see how much of our liberty we will let go before we finally draw the line under enough.
Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privileges to others. That time is now."
Now, without the music and the build-up and the emotional fervor, does that theory sound probable to you?
So we, we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is will get attention this time. Mm-hmm.
Now, there's two ways to read this story. One, Bill Gates is an evil leader of a cabal trying to take over and destroy your freedoms and control the world. Or two, he's honestly been trying to warn us about these dangers for years because that's what he's dedicated the last 20 years of his life to. And only now will we listen. So before you make up your mind which story you want to commit to, ask yourself if there's an imbalance within your emotions that's causing you to need a villain, to need someone to be evil. Now, this is the very nature of a conspiracy theory. It's a bunch of disparate dots that you've drawn lines between. They don't necessarily fit together. There's no evidence or warrant putting the claims together. You're just connecting dots with lines. And that does not a theory make. That is not detective work. That is not evidence. That is not proof of anything. It's just connecting dots with your mind. That's what your mind is built to do. Your brain connects dots, creates a story of coherence between whatever data you're fed.
Our lives are shaped and guided by stories. The stories we're told become the stories we tell. The more we hear them, the more we believe them.
Just like this story that you're telling us right now, expecting us to buy into your claims without any warrant or evidence.
One of the most dangerous stories we've been told is the one that goes something like this. Humanity is a failed experiment. We are parasites, a cancer, a virus.
Human beings are a disease.
It is a myth that permeates our movies, our music, our media, and our minds.
So now he's suggesting that all of the artists that create our films and our stories, they're really being controlled by some masterminds. No, it's not thousands of different artists who come up with their own visions based on tapping into the collective anxiety and come up with these metaphors. No, they're all a part of a grand team, a grand conspiracy to brainwash us.
Fear shuts down the part of our brain designed to solve problems.
Yes, and you're adding to it.
Without that ability, we look for others to guide and save us. In doing so, we lose touch with our most primal nature. We forget that we are an extension of the most brilliant and resilient ecosystem in the universe.
Now, this thesis is completely plausible.
We stop eating food grown from the earth and begin consuming products processed from machines. We trade medicines that heal for drugs that harm.
That's an oversimplification.
That moment when the hero rises from defeat, summoning a force they forgot they had. A force within. A force of nature.
Summon the power to think critically about everything that you consume.
You people are the real thing. This nation will rise up. A new generation of Americans.
It's time to think about the future generation.
A very well well-crafted film trying to paint a narrative that is far-fetched, has very little warrant to any of its claims, but will cause you to fear things more than you already do, given the situation, and to just trust all authorities, essentially. It is strongly pushing a conspiracy story template on the viewer by misrepresenting many of the facts. It demonizes individuals without evidence to turn them into the antagonists of the story, which is always more satisfying to our brains than a faceless, invisible virus coming out of nature. But historically speaking, disease has been the greatest threat to mankind for the last 10,000 years. No war can claim as many lives as any of the most deadly diseases in human history. Our problems are real, and they require careful thought and action, and it would be more pleasurable to sit on our butts and blame other people. But we're the only ones who can solve our problems. So we'd better let go of the scapegoats and start working.
As a father and a veteran media producer, there is no way that I would release harmful information into the world during a moment as vulnerable as now.
You be the judge.